Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
There it is.
Wait, you got really tall all of a sudden. What happened?
Maybe lower the camera a little bit. I think Mark shrunk down in his seat. We're welcoming Mark Groubert in. You can follow him at Lord Buckley, Buckly. Welcome everybody. I'm watching you on the restream as well. I seriously, Susan, there you go. That's what
got
happened.
it.
Good.
You must have been hunching over when I was setting it up.
I guess so. And not only did Susan do a nice job introing us, she has a new move, which she throws her hand in the air as she intros, which is which is nice. That was a nice move.
I had no idea I did that.
So it's almost like Mark. It's like what Adam likes. He says he went into radio for somebody to do this to him. You're on the air, throwing the finger at him. But welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
So before the camera here heated up, we were chatting a little bit, and Mark and I have known each other for years, and he has always been Mark is someone that makes me see things through a different prism, and Mark predicts the future with great accuracy. Would that be safe to say, Mark?
Mark Radamus, yes.
Yes, Mark Radamus.
On occasion, I'm accurate. It is, Joe? It's a lot of predictions, and then my batting average is about
No. I disagree, because the predictions that catch my attention are the ones that are sort of insightful and extreme, and I get it. But one of the ways to understand Mark, and when Mark was telling us this piece of the story I'm about to share with you, Susan said, "Oh my God, Tom Cigars is going to love Mark Groubert." So am I saying it right, Groubert?
Again, only the Germans say the U.
Groubert.
The Jews, it's silent for the Jewish people.
So I'm looking at a French word there. For me, it's Groubert. Say in French.
It's like Colbert. I just say Colbert.
Okay, Groubert. Okay, got it. Yeah. So he said before the mics heated up, do you really think Biden got the booster vaccine? I said, yeah, you're worried if you're the doctor, you're worried about the president. You're going to give that guy, and he got the Pfizer, you're going to give that guy the booster. But then you said what?
I said, why take a chance of a bad reaction on camera? It's absurd. I mean, politically, from their point of view, he could have winced, he could have buckled, he could have gotten nauseous, anything could happen. Why take that political chance on a live camera? I mean, he may have gotten it afterwards or before, which is what their style of government is like. I mean,
theater.
Trump got, I would just say, being politically cautious, they probably injected him with saline in that phony little White House that has become the laughingstock of Europe and Russian television. Every day they're doing a different spoof on him sitting at that little tiny desk, Drew.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And so again, Mark and I don't always agree on things, but he makes me think about things. The other thing he said to me that was sort of a predictive position that was accurate is when we first got to know each other, maybe it was a decade and a half ago or something, you said Arthur Miller is rolling over. There's going to be more witch hunt, and it's going to be a McCarthyism from a different angle. McCarthyism is returning. Do you remember you saying that to me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember being on your ABC show with Lisa, what's her name's daughter was on there.
Lisa Bloom.
Lisa Bloom was on there, and I was on there talking about it over the phone. You were on ABC.
I think it was HLN. I think it was HLN because I brought you in because you had said that to me on my podcast.
Right.
And I thought that was so interesting. I thought, well, let's go talk about it and see what Lisa says. And she, I'm sure, took great issue with it. Yet here we are.
I think she was confused by it. I don't even think it was too far-fetched for her to wrap her mind around at that time.
Right.
I mean, that was 2015 or 16, I believe.
Oh, I think it was, might have been before. No, it was way before that, I think. Or maybe you had said it to me way before that.
We were talking about Trump, so I don't know how far before we could have been talking about it.
Well, you'd said it to me way before that. Anyway, it's probably about your back.
That is true. I said it to you back in the mid-2000s.
Yes.
I was watching a movie called The Front the other night with Zero Mostel and Woody Allen.
Yeah.
And if you reverse the political viewpoints of the characters in the film, it could work exactly the way it worked when that film was made and released.
I remember that film being sort of panned at being sort of extreme in his politics. So,
well, no, I mean, it's really an attempt to do a dramedy about guys who use Woody Allen as a front for their TV screenplays, and they are put on a blacklist, and they're not allowed to work. So they use Woody Allen as a phony screenwriter, which did happen. There were these fronts, and I thought you could be doing the same thing today with people who have been banned for whatever reason, from Louis C.K. to Brett Ratner to anyone who's lost their career in this quote unquote political purge.
What do you make of Jon Stewart saying that cancellation doesn't exist?
Well, I mean, he's clearly knows that it does. I mean, he denying it is not going to make it go away. The denial part is almost the last refuge of a scoundrel. I mean, trying to deny that, for instance, that Southwest had employees walk out over the mandate, and then to say it was simply the weather across the country that affected no other airlines except Southwest is preposterous.
Well, it reminds me, it may or may not be a lie, but it reminds me a little bit about the virus. Like, don't look here. It must be the Batcave 30 miles away. And it's
right,
and it's
what I'm saying is that the lies are now extrapolating out into other areas, and they're just as preposterous. It doesn't matter what subject; they just keep using big lies in all different kinds of areas that are easily discernible. I mean, the fact that Kamala Harris was using child actors the other day as future astronauts when they had a casting session to cast these kids is bizarre. I mean, these lies that they keep getting caught in are either they don't give a crap, or they are just so completely inept that they can't even lie straight.
You're saying lies they. I'm not sure who they is anymore, but I'm
referring specifically to the Biden administration.
Okay, well let me push back on that a little bit and say,
okay, and the media. I'm sorry, and the media.
Well, right, in that the media people have gotten so used to consuming non-truths or truths that are non-substantiated, and not to worry about the substantiation. I find it kind of interesting. And not in a good way. For instance, I have really seen firsthand how what sticks as news today and what becomes viral on social media is almost always, if not untrue, a significant move off the truth. For instance, let me tell my own personal story. My son was helping me do some tweets, and he posted about the vaccine mandates. He goes, vaccine mandates. He vetted this. I approved it. I said, okay, put it up. Let's see what happens.
Tell him when. It was a while ago.
It was a while ago, and we were interested. It was right when the mandates were being contemplated, and he said, we got to create some more engagement. I'm going to ask a question about the vaccines, and I thought, okay. He goes, geez, creating vaccine mandates will create an outgroup. That's concerning. How about if a foreign country mandated you to get a vaccine? How would you feel about that? What do you think that story became?
I don't know. They could twist that into anything. There's a lot of room there.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I learned that lesson from that. From now on, I'm vetting through you, sir.
I don't think like that, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, let me ask you this. How does 63,000 kids hospitalized with COVID become 830,000 on the front page of the New York Times?
Exactly.
So please explain that to me, because there's so many errors in this article by the quote-unquote award-winning writer.
Yeah, but the 800,000
are you now a self-editor? I mean, is now editing, go out to factcheck.org? I mean, how does this work physically?
The 800,000, though, becomes the truth, even when they weekly retract it.
Exactly.
So the truth, my tweet became, oh, don't you know that you have to take a vaccine to travel to sub-Saharan Africa? It's like, yes, of course I know that. That wasn't the point. The point was, how do we feel about these mandates and certain countries? And it was like...
Well, he used the word segregation, too, which kind of spurred the audience a little bit.
The point being is that people don't read. Let me take it to the next level. What do you think about Chappelle's comedy?
That's a pretty broad question.
Well, no. The stand-up special is being scrutinized. Let's say it's being attacked.
Right. What I'm saying, even within that context, that's a very broad question.
Okay. Let me. You're right. This is why I like talking to you. You help me stay honest.
Talking to the former editor of National Lampoon Magazine who did Mass Murder or baseball cards. You're asking me my opinion of David Chappelle's comedy.
Okay.
I mean, it's a broad question.
Okay. So let me ask a series of questions. Did you see the stand-up special?
Yes.
Did you react favorably to it? Overall,
for the most part, yes.
Overall.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you Did you get the argument he was building across the arc of that 90 minutes?
Did I get it, or did you have the same one that I've gotten? I mean, I have a different takeaway.
What did you take? What did you take? I'll tell you mine. You tell me yours first.
My takeaway is it's a grievance industry, and you're robbing blacks of their grievance, which we heard in the 1980s when Professor X and Public Enemy said the same thing about Jews and the Holocaust. Their complaint was that Jews were robbing blacks of their grievances as a culture. And I heard Chappelle literally say the same thing, that his enemy is and have been white people.
Right.
His whole political and comic
life.
Right.
He was super clear about that. He was very clear about that.
And to change into a woman and now say, I am the aggrieved, is too much for him. That was the takeaway.
I don't disagree with that assessment. I had a little softer, kinder view, which was I heard him build the case that if you're African American, you can't punch down. There is no one below.
That's a separate case. That's a separate case.
But I think, but I would argue that's still the same. That's a more digestible version of what you're saying.
Another digestible version of that is that they can't be racist, and that's the argument that he's making.
I didn't hear that. I did not hear that.
Punching down means I'm immune to punching down. I'm immune.
I'm not sure.
I am only someone who could punch up in a society where I'm at the bottom.
Correct, but that doesn't mean you can't be racist. That's kind of a different.
I can only take punching down and translate punching down into what it really.
Okay, all right, but so we heard the same thing, right? We heard the same.
I just learned that word like 2 weeks ago.
Our daughter taught it to her. Our daughter.
The phrase punching down,
I kind of get it, but I'm starting to learn.
They're claiming that he's not speaking truth to power by beating up on the trans community. That's it.
Right, and it's like a comedy thing. Like when you do comedy, you want to punch up and not punch
down. Only person, think of who you could make fun of, Susan. I mean, it's a really narrow, you're not allowed to make fun of many people, right?
No.
By that standard. You could make fun of politicians, which strangely enough.
White trash women like myself.
So that's punching across. That's punching across. But politicians, strangely enough, are not getting the punches these days. Why aren't comedians punching where they normally do? Not the way they normally do, anyway.
Well, you could suggest that every single night for 4 years they did on Trump on every single show, every single night.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, so I don't know. They beat up on Mike Pence still to this day. I don't know what their beef is with Mike Pence. I mean, they go after. The Republican hierarchy all the time, even today.
Okay.
You don't see many jokes about Chuck Schumer. You don't see many, about Pelosi that much. Basically, those used to be the punching bags. I mean, when Newt Gingrich was in there, it was every night there was a joke about Newt Gingrich. And, even when it was across the aisle, there were jokes about Clinton, obviously. Not so obviously, it disappeared with Obama. That became taboo. Right away. But
let's talk about punching down for a second, because Angry Bear on the stream.
I kind of have a question, like, what's the pecking order? Like, is a black man lower than a white woman, or is a white woman lower than a black man because she's a woman?
Okay, so from my understanding is
because they do call us bitches and hoes all the time.
The number one on the pecking order is a black trans woman.
That's the unicorn. Right. That's
number one. And that's what Black Lives Matter switched their website to. They switched it to Black Trans Lives Matter, by the way, at some point over a year ago, and began to talk about Black trans as being the number one aggrieved group in the country.
And so Chappelle could punch down to that group. right? That's the one group that he could punch down to, but was specifically he didn't in his stand-up.
Well, I mean, he told a story of the woman who was his friend who was trans,
but she was not black. She was white.
No, I'm not saying she was. I'm just saying that that was the woman he embraced as a trans associate.
Right. But
there's
there's really an interesting topic here we're kind of digging into, is who determines the hierarchy? I wonder if the trans community is saying, no, we are below you and you are punching down to us. And he's making the case, I'm not, and please don't do that. Isn't that sort of the argument here? The other thing that bothers me is a lot of the people that are critical of his special didn't watch it or didn't watch all of it. It's a complete argument across the arc, and you got to watch all of it. But to argue that
what he has said and what others have said is you can't have an argument with someone who keeps changing the definition of words in midstream. In other words,
right.
My analogy would be I'm having a political argument with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing the political argument and you switch to speaking German.
Right.
And I don't speak German. And now you're speaking German. I do speak German, but I'm just saying you start speaking German in the debate I'm having with you. And it's my tough luck that I can't switch to German.
Right.
If that makes any sense, that analogy.
But let's go back to the pecking order. Who gets to choose? Who is
the Academy? The Academy does.
Who's the? Is this like the
social scientist?
The Académie Française? We get to decide what the formal language is.
Harvard does. Yale, Princeton, Ivy League. Academy has chosen this. I mean, then it goes into the culture from there.
And so Angry Bear,
it's not, black trannies did not wake up one day and say, we're dominating the universe and let everybody know.
So
That's not the way this works.
Angry Bear, who brought this up, I'm reading his stuff on the Restream, is saying, well, maybe you can punch down, but you better be funny. You better do a good job. And didn't punching down was sort of always part of comedy, wasn't it?
Was it always called punching down?
No, it's a new thing.
If you abide by this punching down belief, then they're victorious in their political argument. The idea is to get this punching down concept into the zeitgeist, because once you get these different words and concepts into the zeitgeist, your chances of victory diminish by 99%.
Right.
In other words,
if
you believe in punching down, which I don't believe in, I mean, I believe in the school of Don Rickles. I believe in the school of ethnic comedy. I believe in the school of making people laugh, of, working class, blue collar comedy and Borscht Belt comedy, which is the basis of comedy in the United States since post-World War II, going all the way back into the 1930s. I mean, our comedy has been ethnic comedy since the turn of the century. And I mean, the last century.
There's a great 20th century, that is. And there's a great Amazon series out there called When Jews Were Funny. And it was.
Well, I think we're still funny. I think if you look at even some of these Seth Rogen types and Judd Apatow, I mean these people are still funny. They're just petrified of being canceled.
So I was watching a long series. I was sick. I had diverticulitis. I was sitting in bed and I started watching documentaries, and I watched a long series of documentaries about musicals in this country, Broadway musicals, which I didn't realize came from what was it called? Yiddishkeit, the Yiddishkeit theater, which, and so all the great, like 90% of the great composers were immigrant Jews, mostly Russia, Ukraine, Hungary, the diaspora that, I don't know.
They all went to camp together. Right.
They all went to camp in the Catskills together, and they built musicals. But I don't. Is your family part of that diaspora from the late 19th century? Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a huge diaspora.
Bialystok, Poland, and like the rest of us, Hungary, Poland. Yeah.
Right. So mine was escaping the Ukrainian genocide specifically, and my grandmother used to talk about banditos, and we never knew if she was talking about the Tsarists, the Bolsheviks, or the Ukrainian, purgers. It was bad. So they left. Everybody left, and they had trouble getting in here. They had to get sponsors and pay, and they had to come through Canada, and the whole mess. But the point is that the Yiddishkeit was the beginning of this musical theater that then became musical theater, in America. And the point, let me see if I can articulate this point. It was that they wanted to celebrate the opportunity they had in this country, but they wanted to be seen as completely continental, meaning part of this country. In other words, they didn't want to be separated. They wanted to be seen as celebrating and part of, if that makes sense. While the reason I bring this up is, the comedians did not have that same impulse. The comedians wanted to stay apart always, right? Isn't that true?
Okay, so to stick with the Yiddish, a tumblr, as you may or may not know, is someone who makes trouble. And making trouble is the job of the comic. That's where Tumblr comes from.
Well, say what is that? Because I always heard the comic is sort of antisocial, essentially.
The Tumblr, in the Borscht Belt vernacular of the comic who comes up there in the Borscht Belt tradition of a comic at the Concord Hotel, let's say, was a guy who came up and spritzed, to continue the Yiddish, on stage in front of the paying audience that's at the Concord. And he would use any trick in the book to make trouble. He would say, look at the wig on Mrs. Schwartz.
Right.
That's the worst wig I've ever seen.
Right.
Now, that might not be a joke, but he's creating social turmoil and trouble through laughter. That's what a Tumblr is. That's what he was doing.
Well,
and that's what the comics did.
And theories about
it's criticizing themselves internally.
Right. And so theories about mirth is that it's some sort of neurological process. It's a collective, experience. It's a contagion, but at its core, it has an antisocial impulse, right? So it's in a way sort of scapegoating. It's together laughing at someone, right?
There's different levels to this. There's the court jester type,
right,
like a Bill Maher, who is speaking truth to power, making jokes in front of the king. That's different than someone who goes up and spritzes in front of a large audience, just making jokes for the sake of making jokes.
Okay, but the spritzing though is again a collective against something in us, or some truth typically, right? Some truth.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be truth about, in other words, how they got to the hotel. There was a common truth. How they lived in New York was a common truth. The fact that this was a discount hotel. In other words, the famous joke, the food is so bad here at the Concord Hotel. And the other one says, yes, and the portions are so small. Mm. That's a generic Jewish joke about complaining economically and complaining socially at the same time.
Right.
To break it down for you. I mean, if you want to get into the weeds on jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, that is intentionally a social joke and an economic joke at the same time.
So it makes perfect sense to me that the Jewish immigrant was the first sort of body of comedians, and that African Americans would pick that up, right? I mean, isn't it the same impulse?
Okay, so Lenny Bruce used to have a routine about how the Jews and the blacks got into show business, a very famous routine that he used to do. And he said the Jews were, they honed the act of being charming when they were slaves in the land of the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh would go down bored one day and say, let's go watch the Jews be charming. And that was their art, was to charm power into letting them get off their backs as slaves in the land of Egypt. The blacks came up with a different way. They began to sing and dance and do all these other things and sung and danced their way off of the plantation into American society, in Lenny's abbreviated version of how they both got into show business. Both of them were able to entertain their masters to get out of doing slave level work. Both groups were enslaved, Drew. Not an obscure common idea between the two groups. Both groups were enslaved. The Jews had a harsher boss, according to Lenny, who was the Pharaoh and enslaved them for thousands of years. And they had to own their act of acting charming and getting into show business. The blacks developed a different method of singing minstrel shows and dancing and spirituals. And that's how they got into show business. But it didn't go beyond that.
So that's Lenny's Bruce construct. I think,
right.
I think we could probably come up with a better notion on this.
I'm just citing one of the early masters.
I understand. And I'm sure he did it for comedic effect.
Well, but he was also a Jewish tumbler and a Jewish comic and a Jew first. You know what I mean? So there was some effect to that, and a liberal, not unlike yourself, who, fought for integration. He said that it happened so fast that he didn't even know it happened. In his analogy.
What happened fast?
In other words, the civil rights movement happened so quickly. In terms of time of the early 60s that it was shocking.
But I would argue, I have learned by living long enough that is generally the way history goes. It goes forward, and I'm seeing it goes in these lurches, and then things kind of settle for a while. And we are clearly in a lurch right now, right? And so,
right, but what's the historical barrier though? What's the barrier? Who's not allowed to sit on the bus?
Well,
what's the barrier that we need to break, other than an ethereal, invisible barrier that we can neither touch, smell, or adjudicate legally against? I mean, how do we defeat this invisible barrier that you're describing?
I didn't describe it yet, but thank you for putting me on the spot. But
no, it's others have said it. It's not me. I said, what is it? What is the blockade, and how do we remove it? Well, if you can't see it, you can't. Well,
I completely agree with you that in the last real leap forward in our lifetime was 60. I mean, it really came to me. I was rewatching some Mad Men episodes. And I was thinking, wow, that was 1965. In 1968, those dudes in those skinny ties, those white dudes that were so abusive to the women, were suddenly the cool dudes with the long hair and the mustache, teaching the world to sing with a Coke. You know what I mean? The same guys completely adapted to the 1968 ethos, which was anathema to who they were 3 years earlier. And it caught me as like we're in some sort of a version of that happening right now. It's never all, well, I shouldn't say never. I mean, cultural purges can be terrible, right? But usually it's more of a Hegelian experience where things go a little too far one way and there's a pushback, and then they get a synthetic sort of process underway that's positive. So to your point, what is it? Back then, there were some easy things. Get out of Vietnam War. Civil rights now, right? That was it. Those were the two things that were clear and easy. And you're right. When people demonstrate today, I think, well, what do you want? What do you want? What is it that you want exactly?
Like you, I don't know about you, but I mean, this whole thing caught me off guard. I mean, many people did not see this coming, nor did they know what the beef was. It just seemed to come out of thin air. I mean, what was the beef? I understand you can't sit at a lunch counter and get served. That's clearly obvious and evidentiary and clear to understand. I understand that you can't ride on a bus. I get it. I understand you can't go to a school. I get it. I understand that buying a house redlined is obvious.
Some have argued. So obvious now? Some have argued that this is a reaction. Well, COVID and Trump are definitely part of the alchemy here, right? Agreed? We agree on that?
Well, you could say that I had a kid. If you had a kid, it would look like this kid who was killed in Florida by Obama. I mean, Ferguson happened way before Trump.
Well, but that's gonna be my next point, which is
hands up, don't shoot never happened.
Okay, but why did we get Trump? Is sort of what I'm getting towards, and so. I'm not making this case because I'm just musing about these things. I'm thinking about it, trying to figure out. I'm hoping you'll predict the future again before we're done today. But what I'm wondering is, some people would say that it's really just the ethnographic changes, that white people are losing their grip, so to speak, and their economic opportunities are down, their ability to hold supreme power and whatnot, and is being eroded rapidly. The government is not is demeaning, especially the could all be generated by white males, or being told they're marginalized and worthless, and not given any opportunities because they don't deserve it, or they've had it for too long, whatever it might be. That all that might be adding up to the reaction that people are having now, and that the sort of pendulum is maybe swinging rapidly back and forth between these extremes. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I started this YouTube channel called America's Untold Stories to address these particular events. So one of the ones I'm going to do, I just did a 3-part on RFK, and I'm doing a 3-part series on LBJ, which is going to address these particular issues. And LBJ was a guy who single-handedly blocked civil rights up until the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. This was a guy who blocked it, for 30 years as a congressman and Senate Majority Leader. And all of a sudden, he became the hero in the room by saying, "Now I endorse civil rights." And you can make the argument that white male politicians on the liberal side are a dying breed, desperately trying to hold on to power. People like Garcetti and de Blasio and Cuomo, all Italian white males trying desperately to hold on to a political system that no longer has them as their ethnic leader. So
that to me feels like a reasonable zone to focus on. And so what happens? Where does it go? To use your Mark Radamas.
In other words, to stay in power, they have to become so far left and give out so many favors politically to not be challenged from the other side of their leftist side, for them to be challenged by another politician. You know, you could see that these whites are ruling over ethnic cities all across the country, when in reality, any logical person would say that LA, for instance, should be run by a Latino woman or a Latino male. I mean, that's the ethnic makeup of this city. Why is there a white Italian guy running this city? It doesn't make any political sense.
Right.
And because it doesn't make any political sense, his political power comes from largesse and favoritism and cronyism, which is what's going on here. That's how this guy got into power. That is a dying breed, my friend. Their days are numbered. You're seeing them being picked off one by one, and you're seeing these barely competent Black women being put into positions of power in Baltimore and Chicago and in San Francisco and other cities, and getting into incredible problems with competence and how to run.
I like London Breed in San Francisco. I like her. I would argue that she's an exception in this, but it's really not about.
I'm sure she'll prove you wrong at some point, but the reality of it is, these people, and I say these people meaning inexperienced ethnic politicians, who should be, the ethnic politicians should be running that the cities are their ethnic makeup of. And what I'm saying is that people like de Blasio and people like Garcetti and people like Cuomo had to move so far out on a limb to appease the people that they were ruling over as to destroy their cities.
And yet isn't the sort of the history of America as people moving from extremes back into the sort of upper middle class of America, and then magically, as they say, shifting their political views as they do, and would start electing people that, are not so outside of the mainstream. Right.
Well, I'm saying when Irish Americans elected Irish Americans and Italians elected Italians, but this thing has come full circle now. This has come in completely the other direction, where these leftist white males and to some extent females are now ruling over cities that are majority cities, and have been caught in scandals, have been caught in giving things away, have been caught in complete ineptitude in doing what they're doing. This is going across the country.
So put on your Nostradamus hat for a minute. So we're
going to see.
Hang on. So we've gone through this. You and I have now had this circuitous discussion, from comedy to Borscht Belts, from Dave Chappelle to Yiddishkeit, to who should be representing whom in government, to trying to figure out this lurch forward that we're in the middle of, and how to understand it. Now I'm gonna reiterate what you said to me years ago about the McCarthyism returning. Before you tell me what we're going to do next or how this is going, how did you figure out that the McCarthyism was going to return? The witch hunts were going to come back?
Because American politics goes in cycles. Clinton was impeached as payback to Nixon being impeached. Everything is payback in American politics when the other party becomes into power. It's not directly obvious, but it is obvious in a circuitous manner. This has gone on for hundreds of years in this country. When the other person or other group gets into power, they pay back their adversaries, and sometimes in indirect ways. The second Obama got into power, it was payback time not only for the governor of Illinois, it was payback time for Jesse Jackson Jr., who within 6 months of him being president, both of these men were in federal prison under Obama's leadership. That was Chicago-style politics, Drew, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And those guys did not put themselves in prison. That was payback from a guy who is now ascended to power, who was taking revenge on his enemies. And it is what it is. I
hate to think that. I may be in denial about it. Yeah, I'm naive. As I've told you many
you're not
times.
a hardcore political mind then, if you believe these guys simply stumbled onto something and went to jail within 6 months of their political rival becoming president.
All right. So with that as your frame, what happens in the next 6 years, let's say? Where are we going to get?
I think to answer your original question, you're going to see the rise of the populist, which is where we are. And a lot of people are oblivious to it. But the people who are caught up in it, the populist movement, which is not just Trump, it's DeSantis, it's people across the country who are fed up with both parties. Both parties to them have merged.
Oh, well, so stop. So it seems like you're using the term populism in some sort of a new way that I'm used to hearing it. The current use of populism is sort of disdainful. I don't know quite what they're talking about, except that it's sort of empty propagandistic sort of politics, right? Isn't that sort of the current thing?
Well, no. That's what the people opposed to it say, but the people who are involved in it look at it as the independent voters. There's more independent voters than there are Republicans and Democrats. So this is an independent movement, and the populist movement have go all the way back to Huey Long in Louisiana. I mean, America has a long history of a populist movement.
Well, it's Abraham Lincoln was a populist.
That's right. Okay, so it goes in waves.
Yeah.
And
okay, so I'm liking this. So there's going to be a populism.
I mean, there's nothing not to like other than it scares the living shit out of both political parties. Who have somehow start to merge to defeat.
I see.
That's where I'm going.
So you think what we're seeing here really is the death cries of these parties, or one of these parties at least.
Well, it's not my prediction. The numbers indicate that there's more independent voters.
No, I know. I'm a registered independent, and
there's more of you. There's more of you. You decide independently who the next president is going to be. That group has now fallen into a populist movement that helped elect Donald Trump and will continue, despite the attempts to dismantle his movement immediately after the election by people like McConnell and other mainstream Republicans. Their feeble attempts were completely crushed immediately, as you recall, Drew.
Mm-hmm. So what does populism look like as it comes back in this country? In the past, it's either been, I mean, I guess Teddy Roosevelt was sort of a populist too.
Absolutely, Teddy Roosevelt's a great example.
Yeah,
there could be multi-term people who have to skip a term to come back in. I mean, people who are outside the political process, people who don't know who to hire.
So you're predicting something, if history is our teacher, very positive, corrected.
If history is your teacher, it is popular and populist at the time it's needed, when both parties are dripping of corruption, and you need to throw yourself on the gears of the machine to make it stop, as Mario Savio said up in Berkeley in 1966, when it becomes so odious that you can no longer stand the machine running and you have to stop it. That's what Savio talked about, the lack of the free speech movement at Berkeley in 1966.
This is the first, I got to tell you, this is the first time, because I ask Corolla this all the time too. He's a little bit of a Nostradamus also. And he's like, it's just going to, there's going to be, he keeps saying there's going to be octagons and safe spaces. Octagons and safe spaces. And you got to get ready to get in the octagon and just fight it out and just take care of yourself. That's a very unsatisfying.
He's underestimating the sheer number of people involved in this. I mean, it's an enormous movement involving, over 100.
Well, but in a way, he's right. It's going to be octagons and safe spaces, and then in the middle, this huge thing comes up that you're describing, right?
I don't know about octagon and safe spaces. All I'm saying is politically, these Democrats and Republicans have merged into one party, and there's a huge populist uprising across the country with various politicians grabbing the Trump mantle and running with it.
Well, the way you're describing this makes me hopeful, because I'm hopeful because
unless you're a lobbyist for the Democratic Party or
the Republican, but it makes me hopeful because interestingly, in every period of history I can think of, other than Huey Long, and at least any federal, in every national sort of populist movement, if we take Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Andrew Jackson is another example of that, right? Andrew Jackson.
The popular thing is really should be called a pragmatist movement.
I completely agree. I completely agree. That's who I find in the middle. That's who I find there is pragmatist.
Right. What we're craving now is people cannot listen to this president any longer. Who he has completely lost control of the nation in terms of having.
So let's look at history again. Who does he represent in these historical moments? Let's say in the past, is this McKinley?
In a lot of ways, I think it's Truman. I think because he represents a group like Truman did. Truman was a front for.
But that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit our historical. First of all, Truman was, moved into office. You know what I mean? He wasn't really elected, really.
Right, but keep in mind that Truman represented that Democratic mob out of Kansas City that ran him.
But I want to look at who came before Andrew Jackson, who came before Abraham Lincoln, who came before Theodore Roosevelt. That is similar to what we're dealing with Biden, say now. Was it?
I don't know. I mean, the closest.
You know what it is? It was. Who was just before Lincoln? It was. What's his name? Buchanan. It's Buchanan. It's Buchanan. That's what it is. It's Buchanan. The Buchanan was a lot like this.
It is the American people are very pragmatic, and they're sick and tired of all of these theories and theoretical things, and all the the critical race theory and everything. They're just sick and tired of it. This is a bread and butter country. This is a country that just wants to go to work and wants to make a living and put their kids through school. That's all they freaking want.
Right.
And all they're hearing is sociological theories every fucking day coming out of everybody's mouth, and they're sick and tired of it. If anybody has any kind of gravitas, like this guy DeSantis down in Florida, who's able to just talk logically and speak logically, you're going to win the whole thing.
So I'm looking at the history here, and before Andrew Jackson, I don't really see a good model for it, because that was James Monroe and John Quincy Adams, who were both capable.
Well,
but Buchanan for sure, Pierce for sure before Lincoln, Buchanan for sure.
Right.
Let's see, maybe Grover Cleveland before.
You hit on, I think, also possibly McKinley.
But McKinley was right before. McKinley died and Roosevelt took over, and McKinley was a Ohio mob boss, but he was a pragmatist.
Maybe not McKinley, but
he was a pragmatist, and he. You're right, but McKinley caved definitely to pressures from essentially Hearst and guys like that. I mean, those were his bosses. So there's something to this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, in 5 years, we'll come back and do the next show in 5 years.
I like this. I'll say, remember when you said? All right, I like that. So
you just got to have your finger in the wind. I mean, it's quite obvious, what's going on here. It's not, again, for the 9 millionth time, it's not personally about Trump.
Yeah, but I would argue that this is not like a Reagan thing. That was a Republican.
No, Reagan was
victory.
He was a governor of California.
Yeah, that was not this. That's not this. This is somebody that's going to shake it up a little bit, like Roosevelt. People don't really appreciate. Roosevelt was a radical. He was a maniac. When he was Secretary of Navy, he was Assistant Secretary of Navy. The Secretary of Navy took a 2-week vacation. During that time, Roosevelt bought 12 or 9 destroyers. Just bought them. We're going to order them.
The modern day model for this, oddly enough, if you think about it, is Vladimir Putin. This is a man who goes hunting for bear. This is a man who's a populist in his own country. This is a man who's keeping right-wing corporations in Russia at bay from raping and pillaging their own country. He is a block between the oligarchs and the people, and that's why the people of Russia love Vladimir Putin. He's not part of that.
And then why do we hate him? We hate him because we can't trust him because it was KGB? What?
We need him because we hate him because we need an enemy. That's as old as the American movie industry.
I would think it's that he's so untrustworthy in the deep KGB links that would bother us. I think, right?
I don't know that we had a guy named George Bush who was head of the CIA that kind of bothered me, that he was one of the first to report out of Dallas about Kennedy's assassination in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read the memos, his name is all over those memos in 1963. So the idea that we would worry about a KGB operative at a lower level when we had our own head of the CIA as president of the United States.
So here's so ladies and gentlemen, here's the Mark Groubert I know. So here this is where his head goes very frequently. And to that end, he got involved with, can we talk about this? Your recent appearance in court?
Oh yeah, we could definitely. Like I said, with the new channel, America's Untold Stories at americasuntoldstories.com on YouTube, I did. First of all, I wrote a screenplay about RFK for Oliver Stone, and that is seen through the eyes of Baxter Ward, who was a newscaster in LA and later became a county supervisor in Los Angeles, and opened up the investigation into RFK's assassination by having a coroner's hearing. He became the head of the coroner's board in LA, and Baxter Ward brought in Thomas Noguchi and other witnesses, ballistic people besides Noguchi's autopsy. He brought in ballistic experts here in LA to contradict the so-called evidence that the LAPD had in the killing of RFK. And Sirhan, who was the alleged assassin of RFK, was up for parole recently, and I spoke at the parole hearing on his behalf. And shockingly, the parole board agreed with me and has agreed to parole Sirhan, which was one of the episodes I just did on my new YouTube channel with Eric Hunley. So that was surprising. In fact, one of the commissioners actually cited me at the end in his summation. That I made. And
to be fair, you sounded it all. You sounded. I was your sounding board for your defense position. To be fair, and I thought it was solid. I thought it was solid.
I made the argument that he was in an alcoholic blackout with a 0.16 blood alcohol level. He had 4 really tall Tom Collinses. He's a small man who didn't drink. He doesn't remember the incident. He was in a blackout. He shot 5 people, that's for sure. But ballistically and based on the autopsy, he could not have shot the gun that actually killed Kennedy. That was at point blank range.
But that you weren't. Did you even bring that up? You weren't part of that.
I didn't bring that up at all.
No, you were just part of the fact that a guy's been in prison for 70 years for alcoholism, and whatever.
Right. Well, I said that he served his time. He got a degree. They had letters of commendation from the prison guards. He had a spotless record. He was 77 years old. He doesn't remember. He was in a blackout. He went to AA in prison, and I recommended that he be sent to three AA meetings when he gets out.
I brought up your position to several people, and people reacted rather negatively. I thought it was interesting what you had done, in the sense that if he did it, even in a blackout, behavior changed the course of American history. And as such, it was sort of a bigger...
Okay, but there's no crime on our books for killing a Kennedy. There's no crime in our books for changing American political history. That's not a crime.
Right.
That's a theoretical sociological.
Well, it's a feeling. It's really a feeling.
It's a feeling. Yeah, that's not a judicial situation, which is what I argue.
Okay.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, there's no crime on the books for killing a Kennedy or killing John Lennon. I mean, Hinckley's home listening to music right now, and he shot a man named Reagan. I mean, you can make the argument that if Reagan died, what would have happened to Hinckley? Mm-hmm. He's been released also. I mean, at 77 years of age, as one of the commissioners said in the parole hearing, he said, the reason we're here today is because Sirhan was sentenced to life with parole, not life without parole. Mm-hmm. He could have been sentenced to life without parole. That was not the sentence. Mm-hmm. That was not the sentence. He said, we wouldn't be here today if that was the sentence. Mm-hmm. And I went, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. That's why we're here. And if not him, who? And if not now, when?
Right.
And believe me, I mean, this guy could come out and rail against Israel or go into Middle East politics and be used as a political pawn. But that being said, at some point, you served your time. You did it by the book. You're 77 years of age. Why are you being denied parole? Because your crime changed history? But that's not a legal matter.
Right. I get it.
I'm not denying it.
No.
I'm not denying that it didn't happen.
And to your,
I'm just saying it's not part of the judicial process.
And then what
the
happened?
Countries, Drew,
and I get you.
have laws about killing political people.
But what happened?
We don't have that as of yet.
How come Sirhan's not out?
Because it's got to go to Newsom's desk in about 45 to 60 more days.
Wasn't there some reaction from the Kennedy family that put that into question?
Well, there's a reaction from half of the Kennedy family. I mean, Douglas Kennedy was there with me. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was there. He wants to parole him. Douglas Kennedy wants him paroled. Bobby Kennedy III wants him paroled, and Kathleen wants him paroled. So then there's Rory, and there's also Kerry, who don't want him paroled. But as I said, are we supposed to now take a vote of victims' families to base parole on? Because if that's the new system, we ought to pass legislation to say we have to have a vote.
The victims' families do get involved in the parole assessment process. I mean, they're
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, does it come down to a majority rules? Is that the way we're going to have parole?
No, of course not. So back to on the restream, guys. I'm getting confused. Who is Dave? Please, somebody tell me on there. There's a whole, and if it's. When I think of Dave, I think of the TV show Dave, so I don't know who you're talking about. And my friends are on that show, so I'm curious what was going on here. Let's go back to your website. Susan, put the website back up here if you don't mind. You also did something recently on Marilyn Monroe, America's Untold Stories. What was that about?
Yeah, I ran into a guy. Paul Schrade told me about this guy, Mike Rothmiller, and Mike Rothmiller is an ex-intelligence unit LAPD operative who was involved in various intelligence unit stuff, including the Natalie Wood case, he told me. He's retired for a long time, and he wrote a book. He's written a number of books, but this particular book was about the Marilyn Monroe case. And his book, for what it's worth, he believes that RFK and Peter Lawford were there that night and gave her a cocktail that killed her. I don't personally believe that.
To murder her, or because they had a bunch of drugs on them and handed it to her?
No. He alleges that she was going to have a press conference the next day, that she had a diary, and that she had a lot of pillow talk from JFK and from RFK that she was going to blow the whistle on.
I see. So intentional. Okay.
Yeah, intentional.
Because unintentional makes perfect sense to me. I think we people now understand that that's how people die these days, is taking pharmaceutical agents. She was one of the first, and Nicole Smith, same idea. But do you know the story?
By the way, it was chloral hydrate and Nebutol. I mean, it's a weird combination, Drew. She liked to drink champagne and take Nebutol, which I completely understand.
So I worked in a psychiatric hospital, which was like a museum when I got there. And the Tuinols and Nebutol users were still there when I arrived. And that was a very popular drug of addiction, medically prescribed, if you know what I mean. It's like the opiate thing today. And
Nebutol or chloral hydrate?
Well, chloral hydrate, which they called Noctic, was also very popular. But that one didn't kill anybody. But the alcohol plus the Tuinol and Nebutol could easily. And then as the benzodiazepines came in, the doctors who were the old timers who were prescribing the barbiturates, the Nebutol and the Tuinols, didn't know how to use benzodiazepines. They would often add them in with the barbs, and that's death. That's, you don't breathe now.
Right.
And
well, the psychiatrist, the Greenspun comes over. I think it's Greenspun comes over, and he's there at like 12:30 at night. The psychiatric nurse, who's her housekeeper, who he hired, is there, and they don't call the police till 4:30 in the morning. And the police show up. The guy shows up from West LA, a sergeant, and he says, "How come you called me 4 hours after she was dead?" And he said, "Well, we had to call the PR department at Paramount, and we had to call other people." And the cop went like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, there's other people who are involved who needed to be notified besides the police." So there's a 4-hour time gap where apparently they cleaned up the house and did whatever they had to do. And, and a lot of times with these celebrity overdose deaths, there's people who have to clean shit up. I remember when Lenny Bruce, when he died and lived in Laurel Canyon, the press came in, they propped him up on the toilet, they put syringes next to him, they took various photos. One of the photos of Marilyn Monroe has the phone in her hand, another one, she doesn't have the phone in her hand. Somebody was propping up and making photos. you know, in terms of the narrative. The same thing happened with the sniper's nest, as I described to you one time with Oswald. They were up there for 3.5 hours, Dallas police, rearranging boxes and the sixth floor and putting the boxes in different configurations, because there are photos showing different configurations of the sniper's nest.
And Natalie Wood, you mentioned her name, the same thing. The documentary that's out on her now has a Noguchi autopsy, which were all messed up. All his autopsies were completely botched.
Well, again, I have to push back, because the RFK autopsy was so overseen by 12 other medical officials that particular autopsy was called by the DA's
I would
office.
agree. That's okay. And if another doctor's watching, if somebody else is watching Noguchi, he could adjust himself.
Not only the head of the Air Force, the head of the Marines, the head of the Navy, the head of the Army, and 15 other doctors were at the autopsy, and the LAPD called it a perfect autopsy. Yeah. And in my show that I did on America's Untold Stories, we talked about the fact that he was immediately suspended after his testimony in the Sirhan trial. They claimed that he was high as a kite, dancing naked around RFK's body, singing Japanese songs. And they charged him with 64 different counts of incompetence and malfeasance. And it was all made up because he was testifying that the gun was an inch away or touching the back of Kennedy's head. They tried to stop him from doing that.
To Noguchi, they in the recent Natalie Wood documentary, they flash up his autopsy report, and for a second they flash her drug card up there, the drugs that she was taking, and I saw it for a second. I thought, what? I rolled back, I took a picture of it, enlarged it. She was on so many prescription drugs. It's amazing she was breathing before she hit the water. I kid you not. Right. There's no way somebody could swim or survive on all those meds. I mean, why did he not mention that, or anybody mention that? It's incredible. But anyway.
We just did an episode yesterday. We're doing a 2-part episode on Elliott Smith and the coroner's report in the Elliott Smith case, which you're probably pretty familiar with, because that's 2003 here in LA. He had Strattera, and he had just mild levels, sub prescription levels of antidepressants and a couple of antipsychotic drugs.
Oh, that's interesting.
Was basically had no street drugs and sub levels of the 3 prescription drugs when he died. So the idea that Elliott Smith, the singer-songwriter, took a giant butcher knife and stabbed himself in the heart twice. With no drugs,
I'll tell you what, but you don't know why he was on antipsychotics. I mean, psychotic people, if they're not taking their meds, will do stuff like that occasionally. And so there could be a real serious mental illness that we don't know about here. But let me go back around. Were you aware about the episode with John F. Kennedy where he developed an amphetamine psychosis?
You know, I'm not, but as I was saying to you, there was a woman named Mary Pinchot Meyer who was his lover, and the two of them apparently used to smoke weed and took acid together. She was a Marilyn Monroe lookalike whose husband was Cord Meyer, a CIA official, and she ended up murdered, and they came in to get her diary as well. And I know that she, in her diary, wrote that she did acid and smoked pot with him. I don't know about the speed part.
Well, there was a Dr. Feelgood that was going around political circles and Hollywood circles and injecting people with Ativan, methamphetamine or an amphetamine analog, and opioids. And he induced some terrible reactions in some people. But in any event, my goodness. All right. Susan, how are we doing here? You interested in anything?
You're about an hour in.
Yeah, I know we've done it over an hour. And
you guys can talk.
Just wanted to ask you about the kratom thing. Because as I told you, I had a friend of mine who recently passed away, drowned in the bathtub, and was using kratom quite a bit, Drew. And I think I'm waiting for the coroner's report on that.
Kratom is a weak opiate. And if you take a lot of a weak opiate, you have a strong opiate.
Right.
And if you're an opiate addict and you're using any form of opiate, your disease is smoldering along. It's coming on. Right. And Mark also has a drug counseling degree, and so he's a certified drug counselor. And he and I share, a lot of concerns about the way the addictive disease is dealt with in this country. Not The least of which is a law now that our governor just signed in California to continue the status quo to allow 5 drug addicts to die a day in the street of LA County. I was shocked, frankly.
I was shocked. I didn't see that one coming.
So he made it impossible. He made it to continue to be impossible to address drug addiction and drug addiction. That if somebody wants to use drugs until they die, they are to be left to do so. Period.
I think a lot of this is political, because the people that I've discussed this with, who are not experts but are on the far left, they don't really believe in addiction. And I think underneath the entire thing is their belief that they believe in limited help, believe in giving them syringes, they believe in giving them. They had a street fair up in Portland a couple of weeks ago where they gave out pure meth, pure heroin, and pure cocaine, and gave it out to the people who stood on a line and accepted it. And they said the real problem is the fact that our drug supply chain of street drugs is tainted with fentanyl and other substances. I was shocked by this. They had politicians giving out free narcotics to users in a major city. That's where we are.
I have to tell you that from a philosophical standpoint, I don't have a problem with that. Because I believe giving somebody methadone or heroin is not different, not really very different. Giving somebody speed or speed with meth, I'd rather they take the speed, thank you. And I'd rather they take the kind of speed that's not the P12 or whatever they call the stuff coming up from Mexico right now. By the way, you've got to read Sam Quinones's book, The Least of Us. You're going to love this book. I got to get it for you. It's about the meth factories in Mexico that are producing what they're producing to bring up here and making people psychotic all over the country. But the ethical obligation,
give them the free meth.
But hang on. But the obligation you would have is you need a army of motivational enhancement therapists there going, because there are places called wet houses where you can put alcoholics to drink all they want.
Well, that was Shadle up in Washington.
No, a little bit. But you just have motivational people and they're going, hey, every day they're on them all day trying to get them to break through their denial, and people that are skilled can do that. So it gives you a chance to break through.
Let's give them unlimited meth. Let's see where we are in 5 years. Let's give unlimited meth to people who want meth. Drew, I'm asking you.
No, that will not be good. That will not be good.
So what is your philosophy then?
My philosophy is getting people on board and getting a relationship going with them so you can try to motivate them to get better.
How does giving them free meth get them on board anything? If I got free meth and didn't have to do anything, why would I stop?
But essentially they're getting that anyway. They can steal to support their habit. They can
essentially what they're doing is using the limited amount of GR that they have the first week of the month. From my personal experience with street addicts, they take the $220 or $260 they get from the government. They spend that in 3 days on meth.
Right.
Then 27 days they're using different criminal activities and hawking and stealing to get money to buy meth.
Right.
So what your plan is, the Drew Pinsky plan, is to give them free meth for 30 days.
Not indefinitely. Not indefinitely. Okay. Because I think you get ethical trouble. Where does the gravy train stop in the Pinsky? Well, it stops when you can't. If they are impossible to motivate forward, then you're kind of on your own, and it's it's unfortunate. But
does my motivation decline as I continue to do meth over a period of time?
No, I have seen motivational enhancement work even in settings where people are getting their drug of choice. I've seen it work.
Well, how about the new policy to pay them in the state of California to
not use?
To not use.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with
how much should they be paid?
That I don't have an opinion about. But the point is, I'm willing to try anything.
I'm all about pragmatic stuff. You're still in the theoretical world. I'm talking about pragmatism.
Listen,
Let's be pragmatic. Let's be pragmatic.
I've seen people get paid.
How much should you pay an addict?
Harvard has a big program where they pay addicts, and it works like crazy. And they don't pay them very much, actually. Right. They pay them by meeting, by milestone. They pay them small amounts, but they can accumulate fair bits. What's the matter, Susan? I hear you sighing all the way over here. Okay. She doesn't like us arguing about the new weeds of drug treatment. So, all right.
Oh no, I'm not.
We can elevate it out of the weeds.
All right.
I'm just trying to figure out what to do for dinner.
Well, that's another issue.
That's out of the weeds. That's out of the weeds.
That's out of the weeds.
All right. So we do have to wrap up though. So what anything
we didn't have a strikes back today.
Mark struck back the whole time pretty much. Anything you're thinking we missed or you'd like to bring up that we didn't talk about?
You talking about myself?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think, I just wanted to tell you about the new channel. I wanted to talk about the stuff we always talk about, which is what we do, and continue our political discussion as the Chinese take over the entire world.
Your book also, The Rehab Nation, we haven't talked about in a long time.
Inside the Secret World of Celebrity Rehabs. That's Drew's in that book too, Susan. There's a lot of Drew in that book.
Are there good pictures?
No pictures.
Oh, sorry.
I think there might be one picture of you in
there. Really? Okay.
Really?
Yeah, I think on the Passages story that I did. Remember the one on the cure people and Passages?
Has any of this improved since we talked about it?
It's gotten worse because a lot of the rehabs in Malibu have gone away from a 12-step model towards a money model of no 12 steps.
Wow. It's wow. But I walk away from this conversation with some positive affect around the idea that there will be some sort of pragmatic synthesis that comes out of all the acrimonious stuff that's going on today.
Yeah, I think populism is the key word right now. I think that's the buzzword.
Well, populism has become kind of a bad word. I'm hoping some. I like pragmatism. Bad word for
the people who are opposed to populism.
I like pragmatism. That's always been the case. I like pragmatism. I've for 5 years said there should be a pragmatic party, and the
pragmatic party. I like that.
The problem-solving party. What's good for people, and how do they get better? Period. And
look, I'm down for that.
Ideology always makes people worse. Always. And wherever you look at history.
You see R, D, or a P on the ballots. 3 choices: P, R, or D.
Okay, I'm going P. Pragmatism.
Right, pragmatism, Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, I dig it.
And we'll see how many people are pragmatic.
And by the way, I'm watching the restream right now. Somebody says, "Why no Christina P?" Christina P. and I are reuniting tomorrow. Actually, Friday. We'll be doing some stuff. So look forward to that. Russ says it's pragtastic. That'll be the calling card of the pragmatic party.
I like that.
And I wanted a rational revolution. And Mark, this was their high sign. Rational revolution. How about a rational revolution? Why don't we call it the Rational Party?
Okay, I'm down with that. I don't care. I mean, this is just a marketing thing at this point. But I think what's bubbling under the surface, to answer your question from the beginning of the show, is a populist, pragmatic group of Americans who are fed up with theoretical politics.
A populist, pragmatic, rational revolution. Rational revolution to everybody. All right, Mark, thank you for stopping by. Oh, there's the mugs for the Rational Revolution. Check it out. Can you see that, Mark?
I don't see it. What does it look like?
Show it up. Do you see it now? You can't see it?
I don't see anything.
Well, maybe text it to him, Susan. It's got sort of Soviet era iconography with me and Christina yelling at crowds. So it's pretty good. All right, my friend. Good to talk to you as always. We'll no doubt talk soon. The website. Which website would you like to send them to?
For this one, it's called americasuntoldstories.com with no apostrophe. Apparently, it's americasuntoldstories.com on YouTube. That's the YouTube channel.
And Susan's got it up there right now. We're looking at it.
But you also have a website?
No, that is it. I think. I'm
it's a YouTube channel
on Twitter, and the book is Rehab Nation on Amazon.
And again, tell us quickly who Lord Buckley was.
Lord Buckley was a guy we should do a show about. He was a comedian here in Hollywood who wore a pit helmet, spoke with a black African-American accent, but dressed as a British lord, and was the model for Bill Cosby's long-winded comedy stories. That's where Bill Cosby got his entire act, was from Lord Buckley.
Is this like, what was the thing that, the movie recently, I'm blocking even the actor's name, what was his name? Dynamo?
I know what you're thinking of.
Donna White?
Yeah. Somebody in the restream is going to tell me. He was a white guy, and he was an alcoholic, and he dressed. Oh, this guy was a white guy. He wasn't a black guy.
Right. He was a white guy who spoke in a black patois, and he was revered among black jazz musicians as being this incredible storyteller, where he would do the Gettysburg Address in a black patois. He would do Jonah and the Whale. He would do the stories of Jesus Christ. And that's where Bill Cosby got his style from.
And did he see him here? Is that what happened? Cosby did?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which reminds me of a Norm Macdonald joke I saw him say at the Ice House. He gets out and he goes, "Oh my God, I love Bill Cosby. I modeled my life after Bill Cosby. Everything Bill Cosby does, I admire it. I idolize it. Everything except his comedy. I can't stand his comedy. Everything else, I completely."
I'll tell you something else. Chappelle is very similar to Norm Macdonald in these long-winded
I've seen that. I noticed that.
Yeah,
and he
Dolomite. Somebody came up with it.
To Norm at the end of the show.
Dolomite Williams.
Dolomite.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah,
or
and
Ian.
This seems like something might be worthy of another little documentary or something.
Lord Buckley is a legendary comedy figure with multiple albums. Just a huge part of comedy. We're going to do one of My America's Untold Stories just on Lord Buckley.
Oh, please do that soon. Let them come back and we'll talk about it, because it sounds like a fascinating topic.
We do a lot of visual stuff. We got video clips and photos.
I'm totally fascinated. So let's talk about that again. All right, glad I brought that up. And Susan, that'll do it. And we will see you all when? Monday? Tuesday? We're sort of hitting the road. We got to go to Austin.
We'll be back on Monday.
Monday?
I think we got your Dr. Vasad.
Oh, great.
I just gave Michelle all the bookings because I was losing it.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to be traveling. We'll be back on Monday.
All right. We'll see you all because we have to travel
Thank
at the end
you
of
so
next
much.
week,
You
too.
still have to get my psychics on your show, Mark. I'm telling you.
All right. We'll see.
I'm open to psychics. I love psychics.
Susan, why don't you get Mark on your psychic show? Bring them all back for your old times.
I would love to meet
We'll
the
find out
psychic.
how they all died.
It's a lot of fun. Okay. We'll see you all on Monday. Thanks for joining us. Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydrolyte. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydrolyte contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydrolyte has got your back. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single-serving easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great-tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all-natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy. Or as always, you can find it by visiting hydrolyte.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that is HYDRALYTE.com/DRDREW. Be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 for a special discount. I want to give a shout out to our good friends at Blue Mics. If you've heard my voice on this show any time over the past year, including right now, you've been listening to Blue microphones. And let me tell you, after more than 30 years in broadcasting, I don't think I have ever sounded better. But you don't need to be a pro or have a fancy studio to benefit from a quality mic. You may not realize it, but if you've been working from home or using Zoom to chat with friends, you probably spend a lot of time in front of a microphone. So why not sound your best? Whether you're doing video conferencing, podcasting, recording music, or hosting a talk show, Blue has you covered. From the USB series that plugs right into your computer to XLR professional mics like the Mouse or the Blueberry we use in the studio right now. Bottom line, there's a Blue microphone to fit your budget and need. I can't say enough about Blue mics, and once you try one, you will never go back, trust me. To take your audio to the next level, go to drdrew.com/blue. That is drdrew.com/BLUE. I like the way Dom's like, never thought about it. Huh?
Yeah, I was like, I never thought about the way I come, Drew.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
And it's it's as different as facial features and other stuff. It's weird, kind of interesting organisms.
Also, follow-up question, Chris, how do you come?
I'm so glad you asked.
This Dose of Dr. Drew is produced by Susan Pinsky, and a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. The show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your physician, nor am I practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in imminent danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255 anytime 24/7. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/.